Welcome to the Great Hall at Loseley Park, which has been our family's home for over 500 years. And there are 4 generations living on the estate at the moment. The house was built for Queen Elizabeth I in 1562 and completed in 1568, built by direct ancestor Sir William Moore, who was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. And she visited a smaller house on the lawn out here and told Sir William, "This is not meet for me to tarry at," meaning it's jolly well not big enough for my purposes. So he completed the house in 6 years and at a cost of £1,650, and Her Majesty came and stayed on 4 different occasions. Sir William then got news that she was planning to come a 5th time, and he wrote to the master of the household saying that he was broke now and pleased not to let Her Majesty come again. And it wasn't just Her Majesty, of course, that came. It was a huge number of court and hangers-on and people she was suspicious of and so forth. So a lot of expense and a lot of entertaining with no expenses submitted afterwards. The throne that you see is King George IV's coronation chair, and it came into the house via a friend of the family. And one of the privileges and indeed special enjoyments of living at Loseley, and it is a real privilege to live and work in such beautiful and historic surroundings, is what you find out about the house on practically a daily basis, which keeps the house fresh and new, is the people that you meet who impart this knowledge. And we had who I thought was responsible for Her Majesty's thrones coming to view this, and he came down and he had a look, and he said, yes, as I thought, this chair was changed a week before the coronation. And it was a very lavish event. It cost £375,000 to put on at the end of the 18th century, compared with Queen Victoria's at £70,000 100 years later. But the gentleman concerned was just getting up from the floor, and I said, well, so you're responsible for Her Majesty's thrones, are you? And he replied, well, it's a little bit more than that. I do look after her furniture, pictures, silver, porcelain, etc. And so by that stage I was getting down on my knee. Going round the room, we come to this wonderful panelling, which was from Nonsuch Palace, and the wood goes in less than 1/4 of 1 inch, and to get that perspective I think is quite extraordinary when you consider they had crude chisels for working with and candles for lighting, and to get that effect, as I say, over 450 years ago is quite an achievement. Nonsuch was built by Henry VIII to entertain his European counterparts, but like Queen Elizabeth and Loseley, apparently he only stayed there about 4 or 5 times, and it was a huge palace compared with what Loseley is. The little clock on the right-hand corner is a 24-hour clock, and it has the most wonderful ring to it. Very often with 24-hour clocks, it was only 1 clock in the house, and so it had to be heard by everybody, and you sure can hear that clock. The big picture is the family in 1739, and please do refer to the gallery for more information. The 2 on the right are in disgrace because they're late in from riding, and they've still got their their jeans and their polo necks equivalents on, which we think is why Dad's got rather a bad smell underneath his nose. He was also a bit of a hypochondriac, so maybe he's suffering from an ailment as well. The rest of the family dressed properly in their #1 silks. As you see, there are 8 children there. There were 11 originally, and they died young, and also money slipped through their fingers very quickly, until the little girl in blue came to take the estate on, who was a very efficient landlady, manager of the estate, and she really did assert some control and help to get Loseley back on its feet again. And then going round the room, this Georgian sofa, which is one of my favourites in the pieces of furniture in the house, and I think that the line of it, the carving, is just beautiful, and it's also jolly comfortable to sit on as well. And going round to the fireplace, on the left-hand side is Edward VI, the boy king who came to the throne at the age of 14, and to walk into your job at 14, it would be quite an undertaking, but to take on responsibility for the throne of England must have been the most terrifying experience. But he, to his huge credit, achieved a great deal in his short life, both from a religious and an educational point of view. And part of his legacy is Edward VI School at just down the road. The portraits on the top are my mother and my father, and they have done a huge amount for Loseley. When Dad returned after the war, he found an estate that was had no money in the bank, was thoroughly run down. There were holes in the roof. These windows were blown out from bombs, and the whole place was as I say, was very run down. He set about by getting the farming back on track, and also he then went into producing concrete blocks, which then went to farm buildings, which then went to prefabricated housing, and then in 1968 he went into the production of dairy products. This was finally sold in 1985, but during that time we produced cream, yogurt, ice cream and cheese to some 1,400 customers in England, in the UK, and also exported to Europe, the Middle East and the Far East with ice cream. We produced the raw material through the Jersey cows, and we distributed the finished product to our customers in the UK. So we saw it all the way through. It was a very exciting business, and so they have done a huge amount to get Loseley and secure Loseley for the future. My father was also, and my mother, very committed Christians, and they've also started the Loseley Christian Trust, which looks after and supports cancer victims and Parkinson's victims. Below my father is my grandfather, who was in the First World War and was one of the youngest brigadiers, and was mentioned a record 13 times in dispatches, an incredibly brave man, and who managed to see the war out. And on the right-hand side is my great-grandfather, who was a full admiral and whose ship was the Invincible, which was a precursor to the aircraft carrier, which sadly is now in mothballs. And as we go round the room, you see the minstrel's gallery, with carving by Grindling Gibbons on the front, and then the panels that you see were painted for Henry VIII's banqueting halls, and if the decor wasn't up to scratch, then these would be brought out and displayed, and they're of Greek and mythical gods, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, et al. And they were meant to have been displayed at the Field of Cloth of Gold as well. They're painted by an Italian artist, Toto D'Annunziato. And then working our way back to the south side, there are two large portraits of James I and his Queen Anne of Denmark, who presented the family with them back after their visit as a thank you. And they only stayed one night, so we were very pleased to have such a solid reminder of their visit. And just below James is some porcelain from the East, which was brought back by the Admiral from his travels in the East. So it's each generation has collected different pieces from the centuries and during their time. And Loseley has always been a family home, and it's important that the family do live here. It's not a museum, and it's essential that people actually live in this house. And that's not just for the family's sake, but it's an important part of history, which is important to preserve for future generations. And there's national importance, there's international importance with pictures, furniture here. And we do attract a lot of visitors, indeed a growing number of visitors from abroad, which is lovely.